At Tell Tweini on the Syrian coast, a sediment core extracted from the site contains a boundary. Below that boundary, the pollen record shows oak, carob and cereal, olive cultivation, a cultivated landscape. Above it, steppe-type pollen. The transition is abrupt. It dates to approximately 1200 before the Common Era. Tell Tweini itself shows destruction levels around 1185 before the Common Era. The pollen layer and the destruction layer are separated by centimeters of compressed sediment. No scribe recorded this. No palace administrator noted it in a clay tablet. The record accumulated in the ground because sediment accumulated, not because anyone chose to document it. The drought exists in the physical record. It has been readable for approximately 70 years. The people of 1185 before the Common Era were centimeters above it and could not read it. Brandon Drake's 2012 study in the Journal of Archaeological Science reconstructed sea surface conditions in the eastern Mediterranean. His method used microscopic marine organisms preserved in sea floor sediment, drawn from multiple core sites. The data showed a directional shift beginning around 1200 before the Common Era. Conditions grew cooler and drier. They remained that way until approximately 900 before the Common Era. David Kaniewski and his team approached the same period from a different angle. Their pollen cores from Tell Tweini, published in PLOS 1 in 2011, documented an abrupt shift. Agricultural pollen disappeared from the record. Steppe-type vegetation replaced it. The transition occurred within the same stratigraphic horizon as the site's destruction layers. In 2013, Kaniewski's team extended the analysis geographically. The finding held. The eastern Mediterranean had entered a dry phase. It lasted approximately 3 centuries. The people in the first decade of that shift had no way to know its duration. Cave mineral deposits from Sofia Cave in northwestern Turkey corroborate the finding. Gökturk and colleagues analyzed them in 2011. They produced the same drying signal across the same period. 3 independent proxy types, 3 different methodologies, 1 directional result. Brandon Drake argues that climate change was the primary driver of the Late Bronze Age collapse. Eric Klein, in his 2014 synthesis, argues that no single cause was sufficient. The collapse, in Klein's reading, resulted from multiple simultaneous pressures in a tightly coupled network. Drought was one pressure among several. The causation ranking is not this episode's argument. Both sides accept that the drought existed. Its physical signature is unambiguous. The signal's existence is the one thing this debate does not contest. The question both sides leave unexamined is different. No one living inside that drought could read it as a system-level event. What would it take to recognize a 3-century drought from inside its first decade? The drought Drake and Kaniewski document was not a single season. It was a regional condition accumulating across territories and generations. That distinction is the mechanism. A farmer in the Kabul Plains in 1200 before the Common Era experienced drought as a local fact. His fields produced less. The year's harvest was insufficient. He responded to the immediate shortage. He did not experience the Late Bronze Age climate event. That category did not exist for him. He could look back 1 season or forward to the next planting. He could not look back 2 centuries or forward to 900 before the Common Era. The record that would eventually reveal the pattern of his century was accumulating beneath his feet. The instrument required to produce that category would not exist for 3,000 years. At the state level, the response looked different but operated by the same logic. Hittite kings in the final decades before 1200, before the Common Era, sent grain request letters to Egypt. Trevor Bryce documents this correspondence in the Kingdom of the Hittites. In Bryce's reading, the letters span at least a decade before the collapse. A single bad year does not generate a decade of emergency requests. The letters document a sustained failure. They do not name it as such. Hammurapi, last king of Ugarit, produced correspondence in the same period requesting grain. His letters name the shortage. They do not name its source. Both the Hittite kings and Hammurapi were producing accurate emergency responses to immediate conditions. Neither produced a diagnosis of the system those conditions belong to. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is a failure of available technology. To read the drought as a regional signal, a palace administrator would have needed something that did not exist. He would have needed simultaneous precipitation records from the Aegean to the Levant, compared across multiple generations. That kind of instrument produces the Drake study. It requires sediment cores, laboratory analysis, and statistical methods developed in the 20th century of the Common Era. The Hittite administrative apparatus had clay tablets and grain tallies. The gap between those two instruments is the gap between a felt condition and a readable warning. The physical record and the administrative record were both produced during the same event. They do not communicate. The physical record documents a regional climate condition at 3-century scale. The administrative record documents state responses to immediate shortfall at annual scale. They describe the same phenomenon from positions so different they share no vocabulary. The warning existed. The scale at which it constituted a warning was inaccessible from within. In 536 of the Common Era, Procopius recorded an anomaly in the sky above Constantinople. He described the sun as producing light without warmth. Crops failed across the Mediterranean. The cold persisted for months. Procopius was a skilled and attentive observer of his era. His account of those months is detailed and precise. He had no instrument to tell him what he was witnessing. Kyle Harper, in The Fate of Rome, published in 2017, documents the late antique Little Ice Age. McCormick and colleagues, writing in 2007, identified volcanic sulfate deposits in Greenland ice cores. Those deposits correspond to the eruptions that caused the dimming Procopius recorded. Their data shows a multi-year cooling continuing through the middle of the 6th century. The Justinianic plague arrived in 541 of the Common Era. Procopius recorded that event too. He recorded it as a plague, not as a consequence of a climate cascade. The late antique Little Ice Age became readable to Harper and McCormick 14 centuries after it began. Harvey Weiss documented a comparable structure at Tel Leilan in northeast Syria. Around 2200 before the Common Era, the city was abandoned. A dust layer in the soil marks the transition between the last occupation level and the later resettlement. The layer contains no organic material. Weiss and colleagues, publishing in Science in 1993, connected this abandonment to the 4.2 kiloyear aridification event. That event is documented in Greenland ice cores, cave deposits in Oman and China, and sediment records from multiple locations. Weiss's reconstruction of the Kabo Plains shows approximately a 30% reduction in annual precipitation. There is no Procopius at Tel Leilan. No one recorded the atmospheric event. The drought exists only in the sediment and in the silence where the administrative record stops. 3 civilizations, 3 different levels of documentation. In each case, the signal was present. In each case, the scale at which it operated was inaccessible from within. A drought lasting 3 centuries left 3 independent proxy records and no cognitive trace in the civilizations it ended. The people who experienced it produced emergency letters, grain tallies, and administrative requests. None of those documents name climate. None could. This pattern has a name. The signal no one could read. A climate event that generates a physical record while leaving no record in the consciousness of the civilization it terminates. The instrument required to read the signal does not exist until after the civilization is gone. The pollen layer at Tell Tweini is still there. It was always there. The people of 1185 before the Common Era were centimeters above it. It became readable approximately 70 years ago. The drought it records ended 3,000 years before anyone could say what it was. If this forensic approach to history is what you are looking for, subscribe to Omen History.